Good morning. Today is Friday, November the 17th. The time is about 5 minutes after 10 o'clock, and we are assembled for the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board regular quarterly agenda meeting. Our meeting has been duly posted, and our first item on the agenda, of course, is the call to order and pledges of allegiance. On the heels of our Veterans Day celebration, I want to say a special thank you to those in our audience and those serving on our board that have acted in the capacity of military service, and those that are listening to our broadcast remotely. We do certainly appreciate the liberties granted by your sacrifices, and thank you very much for your service. I have asked one of our veterans to lead our pledges, Mr. Bolton.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas
flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Our next item is roll call.
Chair Jamie Wycliffe.
Present.
Jim Jeffries.
Present.
Tony Pena.
Present.
Clayton Black.
Present.
Lester Renfro.
Present.
Martha Gilby Lynch.
Present.
Alex Ostrich.
Present.
Joyce Newton.
Present.
And Chance Bailey.
present.
And so that for those in the audience and those visiting us remotely, we do look slightly different at the head table today. I am missing my commissioner to my left, but I am duly served by our deputy commissioner, Ms. Worman, who normally is present in our meetings, will be helping me out today. The next item on the agenda is the appointments to the AMC Advisory Committee. While that is continued to have a holding place on our agenda, I don't believe we have any announcements of AMC committee appointments just yet. Kristen?
We understand that.
Oh, I turned you off, sorry.
We understand that the governor's office is working on that, and we hope to have some appointments soon.
The next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment. This item is a place for those in the audience that would like to comment on anything not listed on our agenda for action today, to make the board aware of any issues. Of course, the board won't be able to take up or act on public comments, but we are happy to hear any. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Seeing no indication of such, we will move to our consent agenda, which involves a number of items. Item 5 is the ratification of the official record of the board from our August the 14th meeting. Item 6 includes complaints A through A through I, to be taken up by a single action if needed. I do have one agenda item that I would like to pull from the consent agenda, and that is item 6C, complaint number 16256. So if any board member would like to speak to either the minutes or any of the other consent agenda agreed orders, we need to pull those for discussion. If not, they will be taken up in a single motion. Hearing no requests for additional pulls, if you will, the floor is open for motion.
Madam Chair, I move that with the exception of 6C, or that we pull 6C and then move to approve the agreed final orders, the remaining agreed final orders.
Second.
So I have a motion. I'm assuming that the intent, Mr. Bolton, is to approve the consent agenda in total, with the exception of 6C?
That's correct.
Okay. So we have a motion from Mr. Bolton and a second from Mr. Pena. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously, and we will now take up agenda item 6C, which, as I understand it, simply requires a little explanation from our staff.
Good morning, board members. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards and Enforcement Services. I'm going to let the particular staff attorney who handled this and is familiar with the case explain this one to you, Mark Lee.
Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Morning, Chairman. This case is a little bit unusual in a procedural aspect. We had originally proposed certain remedial measures, and the case started off with an accusation that there was gross negligence and some possible more serious issues. After having a conference with Mr. Posey, we realized that he simply just didn't know what he was doing. It wasn't anything intentional or that he had consciously disregarded. It was simply that he just wasn't that competent. And so it changed from maybe we have some ethics problem to, okay, we just need to get him trained. And so there was a lot of remedial measures that were imposed. A concern we had, though, is we didn't want him out there appraising when he still had these serious competency issues. So we proposed a suspension, and one of the ways that we try to accommodate the appraiser, as well as protect the public and make sure that these issues are addressed, is, and a suspension won't go into effect until the board actually signs the order. So if the appraiser manages by his own volition to get all the requirements done before the board signs the order, there will never be an active suspension on his license. And that assures us that he's getting it done very promptly instead of waiting the 90 days after the board order is issued before he gets these things finished. So we feel that's a better way to protect the public, and also, again, recognizes there's not an ethics concern here. He just needs some help. He was concerned that he would not be able to get it done by the date the board had the meeting, and that he would be suspended. So what he asked for instead was a probated revocation, saying, I'm serious about this, I'm going to get it done, but because of financial and time constraints, I might not be able to get it done by that date. But in exchange for not imposing that deadline, if I screw up and fail to do it this way, I'll be revoked. And that's a serious consequence, and I understand that. So the order had to be changed to allow him to sign that order. Well, unfortunately, he signed and sent back the original one, and we failed to catch that he had substituted the original one rather than the one that we all agreed on. So the board signed the order as presented, which was, in fact, the wrong one. So we're here today to fix that.
Thank you for the explanation. So we took it up in August. We signed an order that is now on record that we are now needing to amend, so we need to rescind the one we previously had.
Right, because it's not in accordance with the actual agreement.
Okay. So is that clear? So he's already completed all of the actions.
Yes.
So the dates are right. But simply, we just need to clean
Fix
up
our
our
records.
August action to make it now match what we really intended.
Yes, and I take responsibility for not having caught that when it came in. I apologize for that.
Okay. Well, when you cease to be human, please let us know. We certainly try, and we need to, be as diligent as we can be about getting things right. But I have yet to achieve perfection, so I don't think we're going to hold you to that.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are there any additional questions of staff by the board before we take up the item for action? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the board rescind the order entered on August 14th of 2017 in the TALCB complaint number 16-256 and adopt and approve the agreed order for agenda item 6C as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Joyce, and I think we had a tie for the second, so we'll give it to Alex this time. And so a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
And just so the record was clear, was that motion just to rescind, or was it to rescind the order entered in August and adopt and approve the agreed order as presented?
Rescind the order that was presented in August.
And adopt and approve the agreed order. I thought that's what was, I thought that's what I heard, but I may not have. So for clarity for the record, the intent was for the board to rescind the order entered on August the 14th, 2017 in TALCB, complaint number 16256, and to adopt and approve the agreed order on our agenda today.
Correct.
Is that clear enough?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. That takes us to agenda item number 7, which is a modifications. It's the discussion and possible action regarding a request for modification of an agreed order in the matter of complaint number 16-247, 16-251, and 17-080. Christopher Diamond.
Madam Chair and board members, Kristen Warman, your Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel. This particular complaint, the board approved an agreed order at its May meeting earlier this year, and the respondent was to have completed 12 hours of mentorship on or before September 5th, 2017. The respondent lives in the area affected by Hurricane Harvey, and in light of the hurricane, the respondent requested a 30-day extension of time up to and including October 4th, 2017, to complete the required mentorship. The respondent was in compliance with the terms of the order at the time he requested the extension, and he has already completed the required mentorship as well as all of the other terms and conditions of the agreed order, and staff recommends ratifying and approving the modification as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Warman.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries?
I move that the board ratify and approve the modification of the agreed order in matter of complaint number 16-247, 16-251, and 17-080 as presented.
Second.
Mr. Black, was that you that made the second?
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't looking down the table. So I have a motion from Mr. Jeffries, a second from Mr. Black. Is there any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion also passes unanimously. Next item on the board's agenda is the opportunity for executive session. Executive session is intended to discuss pending litigation and/or receive advice of legal counsel pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071. The chair doesn't see any particular need to retire to executive session, but the board certainly, if you have a question of legal counsel, has that right to request. Is there anyone that would like to retire to executive session? Hearing none, our efficiency level just went up. And the audience is probably pleased that we don't come in for 10 minutes and then leave for an hour. So having no need for the executive session, the board will not engage in one. That brings us to our committee reports. Our agenda item number 9 and first committee report is a report by the AMC Advisory Committee, which is so graciously chaired as statute requires by our Vice Chair, Mr. Jim Jeffries. Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The AMC Advisory Committee did meet on October 23rd by teleconference. Most of us were on teleconference. Some of the folks were in attendance in the room. The members of the committee that were in attendance was me, Jim Jeffries, Angelica Guerrera, and Sarah Oates. There was a number of staff members in attendance: Kristen Warman, Tony Slagle, Dion Frederick, Troy Ballou, Mark Lee, Wynn Jackson, Denise Sample, and Becky Jarman. Members of the public in attendance on teleconference were Bill Owen with CoreLogic, Joe Waller with FACT, and Sylvia Busk with the Champion School of Real Estate. The committee considered several items, including staff reports and comments to the proposed amendments to Chapter 159, Texas Administrative Code, to align the TALCB rules with legislative changes to Chapter 1104, Texas Occupations Code. One commenter was in favor of the proposed changes, and one commenter was opposed to the changes that would allow appraisers to conduct reviews for an AMC if the appraiser was not licensed in Texas. After considering the comments, the committee recommends adopting the proposed changes as published. The committee also recommends adopting changes to TALCB forms consistent with these rule changes, and I believe we'll be seeing that later in the meeting. The committee received an update on the appraisal subcommittee's rule adoption and implementation of the AMC National Registry rule and fees, and continued its consideration of allowing AMCs to designate more than one controlling person, which would have the effect of expanding the pool of candidates who would be eligible to serve on the committee. The committee asked staff to prepare a rule amendment and form changes allowing AMCs to designate more than one controlling person for the board to consider at its February 2018 meeting. Since the TALCB rule related to this issue is already open for other amendments. Committee discussed possible changes to TLCB Rule 159.155 regarding periodic review of appraisals and requested staff to gather additional information for the committee's consideration at a future meeting. The committee did not schedule a future meeting, but anticipate having one timely before the next board meeting. That is the report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. It appears that you all were efficient and thorough in your committee meeting. We appreciate your service. Are there any comments or questions of the report that you've received from the board? Okay, then we will take up our budget committee report. That committee is chaired, I believe, by Mr. Black.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, so the Budget Committee met via teleconference earlier this week on Tuesday, November 14th, to discuss a possible amendment to our budget. Two of the three committee members were available to meet at that time, which includes myself, Clayton Black, and Mr. Tony Pena. Of course, Mr. Oldmixon pretty well ran the discussion. Essentially, a proposal was made to amend the budget by the Commissioner Oldmixon, and a motion was made by Mr. Pena and a second by myself, and then was unanimously passed. Basically, this is a good thing. So there's about $24,000 in expenditures we thought we were going to have, which we don't. So let me just real quickly read a paragraph that was composed by Mr. Oldmixon in an email to us, and kind of explain it. But Kristen's going to go into greater detail. I don't want to touch on it too terribly much, but that'll be on agenda item 25. But here's what Mr. Oldmixon sent out to us. It said, the attached budget status report reflects a change in the allocation of SOLA-related deposit, reducing the amount allocated to TALCB by $24,100. And this will fall under professional fees and services line item. This accurately reflects the fiscal year 17 actual SOA usage ratio, which was unavailable when we approved the fiscal year 18 budget. This significantly improves our projected bottom line to $25,181, up from $1,081. So the committee did discuss this adjustment, and this is basically a good thing. So we would like to recommend to this board that we amend the fiscal year 2018 TALCB budget to reflect this $24,100 reduction in SOA expenses. The committee did not set a future meeting date. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Black, and your committee members. We appreciate, again, the efficient process that you've used to bring a budget recommendation forward to the entire board. Are there any questions of Mr. Black about his committee report? will take us to agenda item number 11, report by the Education Committee.
Madam Chair, I wish to present today our committee report. The committee met on October 23rd via teleconference with most of the people and then staff here in Austin. Committee members present were myself, Mr. Jeffries, and Martha Gail Reed Lynch. Staff here in Austin were Kristen Warman, Tony Slagle, Dion Frederick, Gwen Jackson, Jennifer Wheeler, and Christy Grimberg. On the telephone, members of the public in attendance were Walt Sanderson with FACT, Joe Waller with FACT, Ruth Kelton, Director of Region 8, and I guess representing AI, Sylvia Busk with the Champions School of Real Estate, and Greg Stevens, President of FACT. He joined in at 2:17 p.m. We all joined about 2. The committee resumed its consideration of the development of new rules for approval of appraiser continuing education providers and courses and possible amendments to 22 TAC 153.18, appraiser continuing education. Staff presented additional information regarding other state appraiser regulatory agencies' approval of appraiser continuing education providers and courses, along with revisions to the draft rules previously considered by the committee. And the committee heard concerns that even under the revised proposal, the proposed course approval fees may prevent local AI chapters from being able to host one-time CE programs for appraisers at chapter meetings. So that was a long sentence, but there's some issues with some fees that are being charged, being possibly just getting in the way of some of these meetings. The committee tabled discussion of this agenda item and asked staff to bring additional information and draft language regarding an exemption for one-time course offerings of up to 2 hours for the committee's consideration at a future meeting. The committee also received an update on the board's appointment of a working group of subject matter experts to work with staff and the Texas A&M Real Estate Center to move forward with developing a 2-hour continuing education course for Texas appraisers. And that essentially was the bulk of the meeting. The committee did not schedule a future meeting date. So, Madam Chair, that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Pena. We appreciate your serving on the Education Committee and running those meetings for us. Again, efficient report. Any questions of Mr. Pena? We'll move then to agenda item number 12, the report by the Enforcement Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since the previous board meeting, the Enforcement Committee did meet. That meeting was held on October 19th, 2017 at 10 a.m. via teleconference. Committee members in attendance was Chance Bolton, Alex Sostre, and myself, Buster Renfro. There were no other board members in attendance. Several staff members joined us for that meeting, to include Kristen Werman, Tony Slagle, Troy Bollier, and Mark Lee. Members of the public that were attended were Joe Waller with FACT and Greg Stevens with FACT. Our meeting was somewhat lengthy, so please bear with me while I share our results. The committee considered several items, including the possible changes to the board rules that would allow supervisory appraisers to supervise more than 3 appraiser trainees. We also considered possible changes to the board's mentor guidelines. We also considered automated valuation models and potential unlicensed appraiser activity, and House Bill 91 regarding review of the board's requirements for criminal history background checks. We came up with the following recommendations. The committee recommended amending TALCB Rule 153.21 to allow supervisory appraisers to supervise up to 5 appraiser trainees if the supervisory appraiser has been a certified appraiser for at least 5 years, and all of the supervisory appraiser trainees are required to participate in the experience reviews as permitted under TALCB Rule 153.22. The committee recommends adopting changes to the mentor guidelines and procedures to ensure respondents are matched with mentors who are competent to address the requisite deficiencies identified in the board's order requiring mentorship. The committee also considered some information about certain online automated valuation models who are licensed by TREC but do not include the appropriate disclosures required under TREC Rule 535.17 when providing a broker price opinion. Based on this information, the committee recommends that the board file complaints with TREC against those automated valuation models who are licensed by TREC but do not comply with TREC Rule 535.17. The committee also recommends the board, perhaps through the executive committee, take up the broader policy questions surrounding such automated valuation models and potential unlicensed appraiser activity. And finally, the committee reviewed the TALC rules regarding criminal history background checks as required by the legislature in House Bill 91. And the committee recommends the board retain the requirements in the TALCB rules 153.12, criminal history checks, and 153.19, licensing for persons with criminal history and moral character determination, without any change. The committee at that time did not set a future meeting date. Thank you for your patience.
Mr. Renfro, no doubt there is a lot of heavy lifting in that report because that's certainly not something you could accomplish within an hour. I suspect you guys must have dedicated at least the day, so thank you very much. I believe your committee is made up of yourself, Mr. Bolton, and Alex, and so again, thank you all for your extended diligence as you worked through that process. Kristen, did you want to add something? Or are you just waiting for your next opportunity? Good deal. Are there any questions? I suspect that there is some action on this agenda that probably will, I have some questions, but I'll hold those until we get to actionable items. Is there anybody that has questions of Mr. Renfro as it relates to the report in general? Hearing none, we will move to staff reports. Item number 13.
Madam Chair and board members, welcome to your regular quarterly board meeting. Kristen Warman, Deputy Commissioner and General Counsel. We're all grateful for your attendance today and your contributions to making this agency one of the most effective in Texas state government. We welcome your insight on how best to accomplish our goal of protecting the citizens of Texas in dealing with real estate valuation-related service providers. Staff has been extraordinarily busy since we last met in August, and we expect the next year to be our busiest year yet. First, we have great news on your staff's generosity. 85% of the team participated formally in the state employee charitable campaign, and through bake sales, book sales, silent auctions, payroll deductions, and more, we pledged almost $24,000. Both the participation rate and the amount of funds raised are new highs for the agency, and we had a lot of fun in this endeavor. Next, moving on to something a little more somber, Hurricane Harvey brought unprecedented flooding and destruction along the Texas coast from Corpus Christi to Orange, leaving almost 100,000 Texas families still displaced. This agency reacted swiftly and in close coordination with the governor's office, our federal oversight agency, the Appraisal Subcommittee, and with the approval of our chair, we immediately suspended license renewal, application, and compliance deadlines for 30 days for license holders across the entire state. As the scale of this impact became apparent, another 30 days was added. And now, because of the extent of damage, for those license holders and applicants who live in one of the 60 counties declared as an official disaster area, we are extending their renewal and application deadlines as needed for up to 4 additional months to February 28th, 2018. We are grateful to all of our staff, but especially those in our licensing, enforcement, and IT areas who worked so hard to ensure we could accomplish this generosity in an orderly and efficient manner. Thank you to our staff. Today, we'll ask you to officially ratify all of these actions. Last month, the board chair, the commissioner, and myself, and the director of enforcement all attended the fall conference of the Association of Appraiser Regulatory Officials, held in Washington, D.C. We heard from financial industry stakeholders and federal agencies, including our federal oversight agency, the Appraisal Subcommittee, and we learned about emerging issues in valuation and shared best practices with other state appraiser regulatory agencies. In addition, Arrow held its annual business meeting in which the members of Arrow elected myself as the vice president of Arrow and reappointed the commissioner to the Arrow Board of Directors. As part of my official duties as Arrow's vice president and as your general counsel, I attended the Appraisal Subcommittee's roundtable addressing the evolving real estate valuation landscape that was held this past Monday in Washington, D.C. At the roundtable, the ASC invited stakeholder representatives from across the valuation industry to share ideas on how to harmonize real estate valuation requirements across the federal government and the evolution of real estate valuation. The Appraisal Subcommittee will summarize and share information collected at the roundtable with all attendees and plans to hold a follow-up session later in the spring of 2018. Moving on to the business before you in today's agenda, since it's November and we are well into fiscal year 2018, in addition to and before our regular quarterly reports, each of the division directors will present the year-end reports for fiscal year 2017 with a comparison between fiscal years 2016 and 2017 as well. As you just heard, some of your advisory committees have met to consider comments on pending rules and other matters and have recommendations ready for your consideration later today. I will let the agenda and the committee chairs speak for themselves on these matters. Looking ahead, we face unprecedented activity around transparency and strategic direction in 2018, and we will need your focused attention to make the most of it all. In addition to our regular internal audit review plan, which you will hear about today, we are undergoing an Equal Employment Opportunity Compliance Review by the Texas Workforce Commission. The Appraisal Subcommittee, our federal oversight agency, will also be here in February to conduct our 2018 biannual program review. You may recall that we received an excellent rating during our 2016 review, and we have high expectations for the upcoming review as well. 2018 is also our regular strategic planning year, and you will consider the schedule at your meeting in February, including opening listening tour sessions in March. Our required quadrennial comprehensive rule review will also be launched today. And last but most importantly, both the board and the Texas Real Estate Commission will undergo Sunset Commission review in fiscal year 2018. In Texas, every agency must be reauthorized every 12 years. Last completed in 2007, we are required to have a continuation bill passed in the 2019 legislative session. We have already provided the Sunset Commission our agency's self-evaluation report, and each of you has also received a copy of that report. It is posted on our website for all the world to access, including all of our stakeholders. We expect the most focused scrutiny to resume in April of 2018, with the potential for public hearings in the late summer or early fall of next year. Next April will also be the month we host one of the most important educational events the agency has initiated, the Residential Realty Issues Summit. In conjunction with our partners at the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University for our second annual summit, We will focus on the challenges faced, the market response to, and lessons learned from the impact of natural disasters, especially Hurricane Harvey. We are exploring formats with our partners and will have a final agenda for you in February. Please excuse the absence of our commissioner. His responsibilities as leader of a large fraternal benefit organization has him busy in Washington, D.C. for a few days discussing the shape of future emergency relief efforts. Unless you have any questions for me, I'll turn it over to our division directors for their reports.
So no questions, Ms. Worman, but a couple of comments from at least my seat and maybe from the board as a whole. First, I'd like to start out by thanking you as I begin to explore and encourage additional volunteer service from this board for telling them that next year is going to be our busiest year ever. Don't let that frighten you, ladies and gentlemen. We still need your help. So as we consider committee appointments as we move forward, it will be a busy year. Our planning years generally are. They require some interesting conversations, but they do give you the opportunity to dig in and make a difference. And so we appreciate your service regularly. We will appreciate it even more when we lean on you a little more heavily over the course of the next 12 months. I'd also like to congratulate you publicly as it relates to your recent election to the Arello Board. I think it is important that the state of Texas have a voice and be active in the regulatory aspects of the appraisal industry. And if you haven't had the opportunity to tune in to some of the information that comes from that organization, I would encourage you to do so. Texas is very well respected in that capacity. Our commissioner's been serving on that board for a long time. I think it's an important place for them to be spending their time, energy, and efforts, continuing to be sure that the concerns of Texas are also heard at a national level. And so thank you for committing to that service. We do appreciate it. And I would encourage the board as well to realize that you do have that opportunity, not just at the state level, but at higher levels in a broader sense to begin to speak to Kristen about what you're hearing in the world that we are operating in, and be sure that those voices are heard as well. We have several of our board members that act in public capacities that both work in the legal field and in the financial world, besides our appraiser members who are actively, sleeves rolled up working in the industry. So please don't think that your voice is not necessary or that your questions are not important, because they are forming recommendations for policies that do affect the world in which we all function, and I do think the service is important. So be aware that we have that resource and that we are lucky to have that opportunity. So with that being said, the floor is open if the board has any other comments. If not, we'll hear the rest of the staff reports. Hearing none, we'll move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Oh, I do have one thing as they're coming forward. Kristen, on the listening tour sessions that begin in March, I would respectfully request as an individual board member that I be notified when those are occurring, especially in my neighborhood. In the past, I've not always paid attention to the website often enough, and so if we can somehow get the board notified when those listening tours are occurring directly rather than relying on the broadcast language, I would really enjoy the opportunity. For instance, Mr. Black, we are scattered across the state geographically on purpose, and I think you would find it very interesting to have the opportunity to go to the listening tour and hear those people operating in the industry ask our staff members questions, and avail yourself the opportunity to be recognized in that audience in case those individuals might choose to speak to you as well. So if there's some way, Kristen, that we can get notice out to the board when those listening tours start and what the dates are, direct notice to the board, I think that would be helpful for us to be able to calendar those events.
Most definitely.
Thank you. Now, I apologize, I don't think I have anything else to say. Please.
Good morning, Lori Deanda, Director of Reception and Communication Services. Before I begin with my reports, I have two new team members that I am introducing. Joey Nelson began her employment with the agency as a customer service representative on September 7th. Joey, as a child, and due to her father being in the military, she was raised traveling around the world. She enjoyed all of the beautiful scenery from numerous places. Once her father retired, they returned to Texas, and after graduating from high school here in Austin, she went to school to become a certified legal administrative assistant. She enjoys assisting people and focuses on making a difference in people's lives. She is a proud mother of 4 wonderful children and has 2 Siberian Huskies. After being a resident in East Texas for the last 5 years, she returned to Austin to be a team member of our agency. She enjoys baking and spending time with her children. Please help me welcome Ms. Nelson. Our next new team member is Alfreda Jones. She has an associate's degree in paralegal studies from Virginia College in Austin. She held a temporary position with the TALCB Enforcement Division as a legal assistant. On October 9th, she began her current position with RCS as a customer service representative. She has over 12 years of customer service experience and is also excited to be part of our agency. She enjoys spending time with her 2 daughters and close friends, and she also enjoys traveling around the world. Please help me welcome Ms. Jones. Okay, the information on staff reports that I am providing are the comparison reports that Ms. Warman just mentioned to you. They're the comparison between fiscal year 2016 and fiscal year 2017. Each fiscal year is between September 1st through August 31st, and also have the month of September 2017, which is the beginning of fiscal year 2018. So please refer to the C1 comparison report. In fiscal year 2017, the total for both TREC and TLCB were received 432,468 calls, which is approximately an additional 200,000 calls compared to fiscal year 2016. The numbers strictly for TLCB is an additional 14,352. For TLCB, we assisted 143 walk-ins, which is an additional 55 compared to fiscal year 2016, and we responded to 4,750 emails, which is an additional 676. Now, as a reminder, the excessive amount of calls in fiscal year 2017 had to do with the automated dialing system that affected our numbers. The email volume has escalated as well. RCS is the division responsible for the email communication between license holders and applicants. Therefore, in January 2017, the licensing email box was routed to the RCS information email box. The next report is a C1 report for fiscal year 2018. In the month of September 2017, TLCB received a total of 1,426 calls, assisted 12 walk-ins, and responded to 489 emails. The next report is the Customer Service Survey C2 report. In fiscal year 2017, the total 693 surveys, 46 are for TLCB. The format difference between the reports are due to our new website that went into effect in February, which included an update on the surveys. March 2017 was the first month that I was able to view all surveys that included surveys without comments. So the report has been edited to provide the current information. The next report is the September 2017 C2 report. We received a total of 60 surveys, 2 of which were for TLCB. 29 included comments and contact information. The 2 surveys submitted for TLCB were submitted anonymously, one with a comment and one without. The comment submitted was a neutral comment in reference to the website being a slight difficult to navigate. And of all 29 surveys, they were all resolved. The next report is the C3 report, which contains the graphs. The report contains the information per quarter. The data is in regards to the average hold time and the average length of time it took to complete the call. The average hold time for fiscal year 2017 is approximately 11 minutes and an average of 17 minutes for the length of the call. Fiscal year 2016 is 10 and a half minutes and the average length of call is 10 minutes and 15 seconds. The comparison of both fiscal years is in fiscal year 2017, the call held for an approximately an additional 30 seconds, and the call took an additional 7 minutes to conclude. The report for this quarter, which is September 1st through November 30th, will be presented at the February meeting. So this concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
I have just a couple.
Okay.
Obviously, the volumes are huge and growing, and the hold times are generally down, but of course, they are reported on an average. So
Yes.
we do, of course, get some feedback from the public.
I understand.
And so obviously, the average is exactly that. What's a typical, and I know typical may not be a fair word, minimum or maximum? Can you tell me, is it possible that someone would actually hold for more than an hour?
There has been a call that, I can't give you the exact month, but there was a call that did hold for slightly over an hour. But the average time is normally around, right now it varies, but it's probably like anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. But we are working at trying to get that to improve. We currently have 3 vacancies that I know that once those positions are filled, it will help us get through calls a little faster.
So our average is actually in the 10 to 15 minute range, but you're talking, when I'm asking you about kind of the longer end of the,
Right.
what creates the average, it's 20 or 30 minutes
Yes,
potentially? Okay.
correct.
And we have talked in the past about how would it be possible, because while the volume is huge at 200,000, only about 14,000 of those calls are on the TALCB side, and logistically, we still believe that the best practice is to have all the calls to come into a central location. But right now, my second question was, it does appear that we are down on staff, but we are working to staff up, if you will.
That's correct, yes.
Perfect. Any additional ideas or technical discussions underway about how we might continue to work on?
We're actually looking into a project right now that we're looking forward to moving or to finalizing it to where we go live next year in fiscal year. Well, and when I say next year, I mean like January, February, March, around that time frame. It's an IVR project, which is the interactive voice response, and we do believe that that will help with the whole time.
Perfect. And then, and finally, and we do appreciate the work of your staff, because that is a stressful position to be in. I know when the connection is finally made, and when someone's held for 15 to 30 minutes, rightfully so, they're frustrated as well. So you're constantly having to deal with that. And so thank you for that. We're continuing to try. I know you all are working hard to try and reduce that.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're focused on the same for you, so that we
Thank
can
you.
create that better atmosphere for all. Can you just remind the public, our call times are a little broader than our walk-in, if you will, business times. What are those?
Right. Our operation time is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the recommendation to have people contact us would be from 7 to 8, because there's hardly any calls in queue at that time, and from 5:30 to 6.
Thank you. So if you're listening in the public and need to try and reach out and hope to not have to hold quite so long, call early or
Yes.
later in the day.
Correct.
Thank you again for that report.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Madam Chair and board members, I'd also just like to inform you that in addition to getting fully up to staff and the IVR project that Ms. DeAnda has mentioned to you, which involves the purchase of some software to help identify the precise question that the callers have before they actually get to the person taking the call. Those 2 projects are ways in which we hope to reduce the hold time. And the third is that we have recently deployed voice over internet protocol telephones throughout the agency, and we are hopeful that this will allow us to have some of our staff work from home and allow us to hire additional part-time persons to help answer the phones and put more people to answering the phones, which would reduce the hold time as well.
Well, I suspect that our technical department is way better than some that I run into, but I wish you great luck with your VoIP process.
Thank you.
Because I did not have quite so smooth a transition at my personal business.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Gwen Jackson, Director of Education and Licensing Services. I too have several reports to present to you. The first report in your packet provides the number of active certifications and licenses broken out by license type. We've completed fiscal year ending August 2017 with a total of 6,096 active appraiser certifications and licenses, which is 40 more than the 6,056 that we had at the end of August 2016. During September, we added an additional 31, which brings our total to 6,127. Primarily, these increases in totals are reflected by increases in our number of certified general appraisers as well as appraiser trainees. We have a total of 183 appraisers who are inactive and 1,433 out-of-state temporary registrants. The next report in your packet is of our Appraisal Management Company, or AMC, registrations. We began registering AMCs in 2012. While it's not captured on this report, we completed our 2017 fiscal year ending in August with 172 total AMC registrations, compared to having 185 AMC registrations at the end of August 2016. The report that is before you is for the month of September, and as of September, we remain steady at 172 AMC registrations. Since we began registering AMCs, 22 registrations have been surrendered, 3 have been revoked, and 45 have been expired for more than 6 months. The next report in your packet is the L1 report. And this report provides the fiscal year comparisons of the number of original applications received, licenses issued, as well as renewal activity. We concluded fiscal year ending August 2017 after having processed 928 original appraiser applications, reflecting a 9.3% increase in original applications received for that same period in 2016. 826 licenses were issued from original applications, reflecting a 4.7% decrease than that of 2016. A total of 3,140 appraisers renewed their licenses timely, which is slightly lower than the 1.8% that timely renewed their licenses in 2016. 36 or 9% more filed late renewals by fiscal year ending August. The next L1 report is for the month of September. This is the beginning of our new fiscal year, and for that month, the agency processed 82 original applications, which is a 28% increase over last year, September. We've issued 59 licenses from original applications. For the month of September, 117 timely renewal licenses were issued and 2 late renewal licenses were issued. The next report is for our examination activity, and the top portion of this report provides the year-to-date results for the fiscal year September 2016 through August 2017. 190 examinations were taken. Our examination pass rates were at 54.4% for licensed residential, 64.7% for certified residential, 71.6% for certified general, and an overall pass rate at 62.6%. The next report is the report for the month of September only. As you'll see, for September, 24 total examinations were taken. In September, our pass rates were at 66.6% for licensed residential, 44.4% for certified residential, 66.6% for certified general, with an overall pass rate of 58.3%. And then our next report is our comparisons This is our year-to-date comparison for year-to-date ending August. And as you will see, there's been healthy increases in pass rates for each of our license types. And you'll see there at the bottom that our overall appraiser pass rate for 2017 was at 62.6%, whereas the end of August 2016, it was at 54%. And following this report is our final report, which is our year-to-date comparison for the month of September only. And you'll see there the pass rates for each of those categories. Our overall appraiser pass rate there, you'll see for the month of September of this year is at 58.3%, whereas last year it was at 83.3%. But keep in mind, this is for 1 month only. And if we look back at our prior report for the month of September, you'll see that only 24 examinations were taken. So that what we'll see as this year progresses is that those pass rates will climb. That concludes my reports. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Ms. Jackson, I have a quick question. I do see that we have improvement in the pass rates, and that's always helpful. As you know, we've had a focus inside the organization of trying to improve education, which, of course, this is one of the ways that we could potentially improve the pass rates. And so, as I understand it, we don't currently have any way to track where the people who are taking the exams are actually being educated, do we?
Currently, we do not.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Steve Spropoulos, Director of IT. Before I get into the reports, I'd like to introduce a new member of our team. This was the last position that we needed to fill before we're fully staffed, which we're very glad to have. John Clark came to us. He's originally from Boston. He went to Northeastern and did his degree there, and then worked for 12 years at the Texas Legislative Council. And so he's got a lot of state experience, programmer position, senior programmer. And so John, in his spare time, writes novels, and he's written 2 novels already. He's working on his 3rd for National Novel Writing Month, which is this month. And so I'd like you to join me in welcoming him to the team. Before I get into the reports, also I'd like to mention that I'm very aware of the challenges we're facing with the phone calls, and actively seeking technological solutions to address those issues, working very closely with Lori and her team to implement things that will help us either drive calls away by giving people the information they need in an efficient manner, or handling the calls better when they actually come in and sort of giving them the information in a more efficient manner again. So I understand that the customer-facing division, is right now the calls are taking longer to get to the actual agent because of staffing issues and, of course, these other things that we talked about. So I have that on the mind, and the team is looking toward improving that with the use of technology, of course. So I just wanted you guys to know that. So for my first report is the I-1 report, and that report there is the fiscal year comparison from fiscal year 2016 to 2017. So we're reporting on August, which is the last month of the fiscal year. And so the totals for August of 2017 for total pages viewed on our website are 9.1 million compared to 12.3 million in 2016. Our total monthly unique visits are at 391,000 for 2017 versus 316,000 for 2016. And on our online transaction activity, we see that we are increasing, applications are up to 53.8% from 46.7 in the prior fiscal year, and 92.1% of people renewed online in 2017 versus 89.7 in 2016. The next report is for the month of September of 2017. This is our first month in this fiscal year. And the total pages viewed are at 737,000 pages versus 930 for last September. And our total monthly unique visits are 39,647 versus 29,000 in the prior year's month of September. When looking at our applications and renewals, we are seeing an increase in the online applications from 43% last September to 60% this year, and a slight drop in our renewals from 98% to 93.2%. The next report is the I-2 report, and this is for August of 2017. So our latest numbers, this is the end of the fiscal year, rather. So at the end of that fiscal year, we had 63.4% for the month of August for applications online, 89.9% for renewals online, and the online panel management is used at 100%. Next report is for just this month of September of 2017, so it's the graphical representation. We had 60%, again, as I mentioned, for our applications, 93.2% for our renewals, and our panels are all managed online. So thank you for your time today. And are there any questions, comments? Okay.
No, thank you for your comments earlier. We do appreciate you constantly focusing on how we can continue to use technology, and I think we've done a good job. I want to be clear that this hold time problem is not new. It's something that we've dealt with over the course of probably the last 5 or 6 years, and so we've continued to make forward progress. I just want us to continue focusing on that, and we know we've got great staff that's doing so, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Chair and board members, before he leaves the podium, I'd just like to make you aware that Mr. Spiropoulos and his wife are now the proud parents of a brand new baby girl.
Oh, congratulations. How exciting. You look much better than most new dads, so you must have gotten some sleep.
I'm being selfish and sleeping while my wife takes care of the baby. It's terrible.
Well, we may need her phone number.
Good morning. I'm Priscilla Pifo, Director of Staff and Support Services, and my first report is the budget status report for the end of August. This is reckoning of year-end expenditures and revenues, the ending balance including payables from the end of the year that go into September, so we don't report them until August is done, and then we can report that at the end of the year now. So that is the first report. The second report we have is our September budget status report. We'll come back to this when we do the budget amendment later. This one right now is showing you expenditures through the end of September, and that's the first month of our fiscal year. Moving on to our investment reports. As you recall, we have a laddered approach to investments, and the quarterly maturity dates are on the right. As they mature, we roll them in. This time we had one come due. We did increase it slightly. At the end of a fiscal year, we were able to take assessment of our balances and determine whether or not we have bandwidth to add some, and we did this time, which brings our ending balance to $1,020,566.13. You'll notice that we have 2 new signatures on this investment report. In addition to myself, Melissa Huerta and Aretha Trice are alternate investment officers, and Barbara Kolb, who was the chief accountant prior and retired in September, as you recall, her signature is no longer on that. How this works is when we have investment officers receive the training for the Public Funds Investment Act, they're required then to have their signature on these reports as well. And I'm also required to report to you that we have completed all of the training for all of the officers and the members for the Public Finance Investment Act, PFIA. So we are fully in compliance. My final report is reserved fund balances for the Education Reserve and the Long-Term Facilities Master Plan. This annual report gives you the balances that have been approved through the budget process, gives you a final accounting of educational reserves based on actual administrative penalties received. And then, of course, the Long-Term Facilities Master Plan was approved in the budget that you approved in August. So these are the balances that we currently have, and we've also reflected expenditures that have come out of those balances as well. And if you have no questions, that is the end of my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, board members, Madam Chair. Troy Bollier, Director of Standards of Enforcement Services. Bring your attention to the E1 report for appraiser matters. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that through the end of September, we currently have 232 matters pending with the Enforcement Division. You can see historically on the left-hand side, the columns for 2016 and 2017, that we are down a bit in terms of incoming matters from 356 matters to 325 matters. So things are down a bit comparing the prior fiscal years. Currently for this fiscal year, we have 23 matters that have come in. You can see on the far right-hand side in the top portion. And in terms of closures, on the bottom right-hand corner, we have 22 matters that have closed. The next report is the E1 report for appraisal management companies. And again, we're seeing a similar trend downward when you look at the prior two fiscal years comparison from 17 to 9 matters that were received. Currently, through the month of September, you can see in the bottom left, we only have 5 that are open. And in fact, I know that's now down to 4. You'll see that next quarter because of the month of October. And then we're seeing very little activity, as you can see on the right-hand side, both in terms of incoming matters and closures. In terms of total open complaints, I wanted to bring your attention to 2009 and 2015 matters. You'll recall those are so old because they are requests for assistance from our law enforcement partners. And next time you see this report, actually, the 2015 matter will be gone. Law enforcement gave us permission in October to close our file, and they're done with their inquiry into the matter. And the 2009 case, I can tell you, you know how litigation is. It just seems to never end. Earlier this week, I confirmed with our law enforcement partner that they have again continued the criminal trial date in this matter to February. So hopefully it'll be resolved, if not sooner, certainly by February. But again, we keep our files open at their request, so that's why those are there. In terms of the more recent complaints, you can see that we are down in our totals, the green row there, from 234 pending as of the end of June to 171 pending as the end of September. So we've moved forward in resolving matters by a little more than 25%. I would point out a significant little bubble there. You'll see in 2017 under the SOA column that there is 30 matters pending at SOA, the State Office of Administrative Hearings. And of course, that's an unusually high number. As you heard earlier from the budget, we've actually been expending less funds related to going to SOA. And I will just point out that 27 of those 30 matters relate to one particular egregious case involving identity theft. So there was a high number of complaints filed against this individual, and it actually, we're anticipating it being resolved on a default basis shortly. So that's why that spike is there. The other thing I'd like to point out is in terms of total one-year-old cases, you'll see the comparison from the end of February to the end of September. It appears like it's only down slightly by 2, but actually there's an additional 12 matters that are awaiting final dispositions. Several of those were the agenda that you approved here today. So we're actually in much better shape, and we're excited about meeting our goals at the upcoming February ASC audit. The next slide will give you a picture of complaint resolutions for the fiscal year we just finished in August. And you can see we had a total of 173 total complaints resolved there with the pie chart on the left. The vast majority of those for this past fiscal year and historically have been dismissals. And you can see there on the right-hand side, we're roughly talking about 3/4 of the matters are resolved by some form of dismissal. And again, you can see the breakdown, the difference between plain dismissals, dismissal with warning, and then our contingent dismissals, which we're particularly happy with that program, where people can get the benefit of some improvements in areas of weakness without the black mark, if you will, on their record, without a formal discipline. As you can see, all last year we didn't have any matters that actually required contested litigation, but we did have 11 matters that were a default. So sometimes we did go to court, but nobody showed up and we didn't actually have to litigate the case. In terms of recidivism rate, you can see for the past fiscal year, that's right around just under 14%. And again, we calculate the recidivism rate based on whether someone has had more than one disciplinary action within the current fiscal year and the 2 prior fiscal years. And then you can see there, in terms of the overall licensee numbers, roughly about 7,600 license holders. For the last fiscal year, we're looking at roughly a 0.4% of that population actually has a disciplinary issue. So when we talk about enforcement, we're talking about very, very small numbers of people that are actually having significant issues. So that's a look back at the prior year. Then if we move forward, of course, this is going to be very simple, because the first opportunity we've had to have any disciplinary actions was at the meeting today. So we've only had 12 dismissals. Again, we're only talking about 1 month of data. So not a lot to report here. Then I'll bring your attention to number of complaints received by license type. And you can see there the progression over the last 7 years. And a total of 1,466 total complaints over this whole time frame. But again, we do see the numbers tending downward a bit in FY 16 and 17, and then of course 2018 we only have 1 month of data, so we'll see where things head from there. But you can see the breakout by license type, and again, historically, most of what we see complaint-wise is in the residential context. The last slide I wanted to bring to your attention has been revised a bit at the request of some of your members. You'll remember from the August meeting. And this slide, again, addresses staff-initiated complaints based on experience audits. And so what you have on the left-hand side is a bar chart, and you can see the last 3 fiscal years of data showing how many complaints were actually opened. And it's broken down by the different licensure categories there. And then on the right-hand side, we have a pie chart that gives you the total number of complaints over basically the last 9 fiscal years. So 56 total complaints, and in the last 3 years, a much smaller number. You can see, for example, for 2017, 8 matters were open. Most of those were the supervisory appraiser. And again, have some bulleted statistics below that I think generally reflects that we're talking about a very small universe of complaints that actually get opened against people based on audits. And like I said, it's a very small number, and most of those are focused towards the supervisory appraiser, who has the greater responsibility, the duty to diligently supervise and train the appraiser trainee. And you can see at the bottom there, in terms of the breakdown of those in terms of how they were resolved and in terms of the license type that the individual had. So that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I just have a quick one, Troy. In our training this morning, the audit process was described as looking at the standard from the trainee standpoint was to meet a minimum standard. In other words, the quality of work expectation for the trainee was of minimal standard. And of course, we see significant percentage of higher complaints lodged against the trainer. Is the trainer in the audit process held also to a set of minimum standards or to something higher than that?
No, the minimum standard is the same. That's embodied in the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And the point, obviously, and we have this discussion at times with consumers who file complaints, is there may be best practices. There may be something more than USPAP or state law requires that could make you better at what you're doing. But, you know, the way state law works is there are minimum standards. And so we want to be very careful that we're not holding someone to a best practices or a personal preference standard when it really is minimal standards that we're enforcing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
So now to the really fun and exciting part of the work that we do. We are moving to the rules for possible adoption. Agenda item number 14, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to subchapter A, Chapter 157.22, Texas Administrative Code, rules relating to practice and procedure, and item 14A, denial of license, adverse action against a license holder. Ms. Worman?
Madam Chair and board members, before you in agenda items 14 through 16 are amendments that have been proposed to Chapter 157. These proposed amendments align the rules in Chapter 157 with the statutory changes that were adopted by the 85th Legislature earlier this year and make conforming changes for consistency. The Executive Committee has reviewed the proposed amendments and recommends the board adopt the amendments as published. No comments were received on the amendments as proposed, and staff recommends adopting the amendments as published.
So, Ms. Worman, for clarity, I opened agenda item 14, but it does appear that the item is listed so that you could take up 14, 15, and 16 as a single motion. In the past, that's been problematic. It currently doesn't appear to be so as I look at this particular agenda item, so feel free to make your motion accordingly. You may either address them individually or collectively.
Madam Chair, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 157.7, 157.9, 157.12, 157.15, and 157.17 without changes to text as published in the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption, which would include agenda items 14 through 16.
Thank you, Mr. Black, for an excellent motion.
I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a second by Mr. Black, and no offense, Mr. Bolton, because I've already overlooked you once, but I believe Ms. Martha Gale also gave me a second.
I certainly defer.
So we will we'll spread the opportunity around.
Thank you.
So have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 17.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
could I ask for a short recess?
Yes, sir. I was going to try and push you for 15 minutes, but we'll go ahead and take it now. The time is about 11:30, and or 11:25, my apologies, and there has been a request. Let's take a 10-minute recess. Please. here. It's crazy. Well, we just missed you. You should have texted me. I would have told you where we were having dinner.
I didn't get back into 5:30.
So we will consider ourselves back in session at 11:40. Ms. Warman remind me where we left off. 17?
Madam Chair, it was agenda item 17.
We are opening agenda item number 17, discussion and possible action to adopt new rules and amendments to 22 TAC, Chapter 159, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Appraisal Management Company Registration and Regulation Act.
Madam Chair and board members, before you in this agenda item are proposed amendments to Chapter 159. This is the chapter that is applicable to appraisal management companies, and there are several amendments before you. You may recall that in this recent legislative session, we had several amendments to Chapter 1104 of the Texas Occupations Code, and we have proposed a new rule regarding identity theft and amendments to several rules in Chapter 159 to align these rules with the statutory changes that were adopted by the legislature. These amendments and the new rule change a caption to eliminate duplicity and confusion, clarify the meaning of the term assignment in Section 1104.154 of the AMC Act, as well as the type of appraiser credential required to be qualified to perform an appraisal review within the meaning of Section 1104.153 of the AMC Act. They also make conforming changes for consistency. The AMC Advisory Committee has reviewed the proposed new rule and amendments and recommends the board adopt the amendments as published. We did receive comments on these amendments as published. One comment was received on Section 159.104 from a trade association expressing concern that 10 days was too short of a time period to notify the board about changes to the primary contact or appraiser contact. Staff disagrees with the commenter and notes that the purpose of this section is to provide the board with a point of contact to answer questions should they arise. Staff further notes that an AMC has the option of notifying the board of interim personnel changes in these positions within 10 days and, after taking additional time to vet replacement candidates, notifying the board of a permanent replacement for either position upon selection and confirmation by the AMC. One comment was also received on Section 159.154 from a trade association in support of the proposed changes. 3 comments were received on Section 159.155. One from a trade association in support of the proposed changes. The remaining 2 commenters pointed out that the changes would allow an appraiser to conduct appraisal reviews for an appraisal management company if the appraiser is not licensed in Texas. While this is correct, staff notes that USPAP requires all appraisers to be geographically competent to conduct the appraisal reviews at issue. Further, the amendments are consistent with the changes adopted by the 85th legislature. One comment was received on Section 159.205 from a trade association, but the commenter withdrew its comment after a conversation with staff resolved the commenter's concern about the proposed changes. No comments were received on the remaining amendments as published. Staff recommends adopting the amendments as published.
Thank you, Ms. Warman.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
you allow me, being chair of that committee, I'd like to move that the staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 159-159.1, 159.4, 159.52, 159.102, 159.104, 159.105, 159.154, 159.155, 159.156, 159.201, and 159.205, all of those, without changes to text as published in the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption. As required for adoption. Thank you.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion by Mr. Jeffries, a second by Ms. Black, and I do have some discussion, but prior to jumping into my questions, I'd like to open the floor. Does any of the board have, sorry?
A second by Ms. Lynch.
Oh, I'm sorry, what did I say?
Black.
Well, sorry. Sorry, Clayton, I got y'all married up. My apologies. My apologies, Martha Gale. It's that hyphenated name. I guess I was just adding some more to it. So the record will reflect the motion and second as corrected. Thank you for the correction. Does anyone else have questions? I've got just a couple. Okay, hearing none, Mr. Jeffries, some of these relate to your committee meetings. So the AMC committee is currently not what we'll call fully staffed. We're still waiting on a couple of trade association, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Worman, and correct me.
One trade association member and one public member.
Thank you. So my questions really relate to feedback that I had received from the public, and I was not present, nor I was availed the opportunity, but was not present at your committee meeting. And so mine are just clarification or understanding. Was the recommendation unanimous by those people who were present in your committee meeting?
Yes, there was 3 members of the committee at that committee meeting, and although we had an extensive amount of discussion about each one of the issues, essentially, it was a unanimous recommendation for approval of the 3 of us.
Thank you. And was Ms. Oates present in that meeting?
She was.
And the reason I ask is Ms. Oates raised some questions about history and some of the AMC actions, and so I just wanted to be sure that those questions that she raised to me got fully addressed at a committee level and you felt comfortable that she was happy to move forward. The second that I have is, I note that in the comments, the first round of comments speaks to a trade association member speaking to the time period being too short, and of course staff giving an explanation for that the committee has obviously heard, reconciled, and is comfortable with. But I'm just curious, did the trade association have some recommendation for something longer than 10 days, or was it just simply that they didn't think 10 days was long enough?
Well, the amendments would change and shorten the time period to be consistent with other time periods throughout the board's rules, and would change from 15 days to 10 days. And the concern was, well, that's not enough time to vet somebody, interview, and hire them. And after we explained that they had this option, the commenter was satisfied with that explanation and appreciated that alternative.
And then finally, my last question deals with the last paragraph of the report that you read, which it says one comment was received on 159.205, but they withdrew the comment. It just doesn't give me any context for what they were concerned about that they then withdrew. Can you give me an understanding of that?
Yes, Madam Chair. Essentially, the comment 159.205 is the new rule related to identity theft. Just for your own and the rest of the board's consideration, we have a similar rule for appraisers who suffer identity theft. And this was to adopt a rule consistent for AMC, so that if an AMC discovered that its license was being used without authorization, perhaps by a rogue employee or an employee who has departed the AMC, then this would provide a procedure for the AMC to notify the board and for us to issue a new license number for that AMC. The commenter's comments mistook the board's proposed action and thought we were trying to impose requirements for AMCs to meet federal standards for consumer identity theft. And that was not our purpose at all. So once we reconciled those differences, the commenter withdrew the comment.
Thank you. Mostly that was for the record, so that, because with what's typed here, I just needed to, I know that I'm going to need to go back someday and look that up potentially. So I appreciate the explanations. We do have a motion and a second. The floor is open for discussion if anyone else has questions. If not, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And thank you for the detailed explanations, both Mr. Jeffries and Kristen. Agenda item number 18, rules for possible proposal, is a discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC 153.21 appraiser trainees and supervisory appraisers.
Madam Chair and board members, before you in this agenda item is one of the recommendations from the Enforcement Committee. The proposed amendments to Rule 153.21 would allow supervisory appraisers to supervise up to 5 appraiser trainees if the supervisory appraiser and all of the trainees supervised by that supervisory appraiser meet certain additional criteria as required by the Appraiser Qualifications Board. As you heard in the Enforcement Committee report, these additional criteria would be that they must be certified, the supervisory appraiser must have been certified for a minimum of 5 years, and all of the trainees of the supervisory appraiser must also participate in the voluntary experience reviews as provided under Rule 153.22. Staff recommends proposing the amendments as presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Pena?
yes, I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit amendments to 22 TAC 153-21 appraiser trainees and supervisory appraisers as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
We have a motion.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Pena, a second by Mr. Jeffries, and I may have to stop that practice since I made such an entertaining gaffe a moment ago. The floor is open for discussion. Alex?
I just have one question, and I'm no expert in, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not an expert in legislative construction. I saw the word "or" there at the end of that subsection A. And it just seemed like it didn't belong there to me.
Well,
So it reads, unless the requirements in subsection A3B are met. And it seemed like it would end there, and then subsection B would then be a separate one. I don't know, it just seemed it might be out of place, but I don't know if y'all discussed that at all.
we did, and the "or" is because A and B are 2 alternatives. So that is why the "or" is required. They're different alternatives. A is the current standard that supervisory appraisers may supervise no more than 3 appraiser trainees at one time, unless the requirements in A3B are met, or supervisory appraisers may supervise up to 5 trainees. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it just seemed like since it was referencing A3B within A, that's fine. It just seemed a little awkward, but.
Sure, happy to answer your questions.
Are there any other questions? There is a motion and a second. Any other input? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Takes us to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action to approve rule review plan for 2018.
And Madam Chair and board members, I will turn the podium over to Tony Slagle, our government affairs person, who will explain agenda items 19 and 20.
Good, it's still morning. Good morning, Chair, Madam Chair, board members. My name is Tony Slagle. I'm government affairs for the board. And as Ms. Warman stated, I'm presenting items 19 and 20. So the item 19, Section 2001 .039 of the Government Code requires state agencies to undergo a rule review process every 4 years. And this is to determine if the rules as they are sufficient as currently written, if they need to be tweaked, amended in any way, or if there's a need to repeal any of them. So before you right now is the proposed rule schedule for this upcoming year. As you can see, the rules are divided into 3 sections, with the review starting this November and concluding in November of 2018. I've been made aware that there's no longer a need to submit the rule plan to the register, but we do still need the board to adopt or approve of the plan as presented.
Madam Chair and board members, the staff recommendation is to approve the rule plan as presented. And also, just to echo Mr. Slagle's comments, our primary focus in this rule review will be on eliminating unnecessary barriers and cleaning up any unnecessary requirements in our rules.
Very good. So I'm either going to need to bring coffee in, or if there's if the pause is intended.
Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to
Mr.
move
Renfro.
that the staff is authorized on behalf of the board to submit the rule plan to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Second.
Thank you.
My apologies, Madam Chair. As Mr. Slagle explained, we no longer need to publish the rules in the Texas Register, so the motion need only be to approve the plan as presented.
Madam Chair, I'll amend my motion that the staff's authorized to submit the rule plan for approval.
To approve the rule plan. Got it.
You got it.
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Ms. Warman, do you have the direction you need appropriately worded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and so we will now take up agenda item number 20.
Agenda item number 20, discussion of possible action to propose a review of 22 TAC Chapter 155, rules relating to standards of practice, and 22 TAC Chapter 157, rules related to practice and procedure. This item begins the rule review process in accordance with the schedule you just approved, and so the following, or those rules that I just mentioned, are scheduled to be opened up for review currently, and then any amendments or changes will be brought forward at the February meeting to be adopted at the May meeting. It's just
Thank you.
so staff recommends approving this as presented.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit the review of 22 TAC Chapter 155, rules relating to standard of practice, and 22 TAC Chapter 157, rules relating to practice and procedure, to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion also passes unanimously. Thank you. We look forward to what you bring forward in the future. Takes us to agenda item number 21, pending business, discussion and possible action regarding the agency response to Hurricane Harvey.
Madam Chair and board members, as you heard earlier in my report about the actions that the agency took in response to Hurricane Harvey, we would just ask that you ratify those actions for the benefit of our license holders and applicants. And to the board member who has the pleasure of recommending a motion, if you would just add, in addition to license holders and applicants, in your motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I'll try it. I move that the board ratify the action approved by the chair of the board and the governor's office to suspend TALCB rules and extend application, renewal, and compliance deadlines following Hurricane Harvey for all license holders and applicants in the state to October 31st, 2017, and for those license holders and applicants in the 60-county disaster area declared by the governor up to February 28th, 2018.
Excellent job, Mr. Jeffries. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joyce. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, would this be a good time to jump in on? All right. I wanted to pass something along that kind of runs very much along this line. This was directly from the governor, and I just wanted for everyone to hear, because he did want me to pass this along to the board, and very much it relates to Hurricane Harvey. So I had the pleasure of meeting him in Midland, Governor Abbott, on October 17th at a reception he had at a house, and I made it a point after he got through speaking. He spoke for about 20-30 minutes, and it's a very small venue, 50-60 people probably, but about 2/3 of his time he spent talking about Hurricane Harvey and how his heart's going out to, as all of us do. We're all affected by it in some way, shape, form, or fashion, but he spent a great deal of his time talking about that. But afterwards I made a point to beeline to him and introduce myself. I'd never met him, and hey, thank you, Governor Abbott, for reappointing me to my board. I serve on the Texas Appraiser Licensing Certification Board. You reappointed me, and thank you very much. But I'm a public member. I'm an oil man, oil and gas like everybody else out here, but serve as a public member. And he said, hey, there's something I want you to pass along. And so I called Jamie the next day, and Commissioner Oldmixon as well, and passed along. But I wanted to as well just take this opportunity right now. And so, of course, his heart goes out to it, and he's very concerned. But he just said, would you pass along to the board? It's very broad, but if we can get more appraisers down there in those affected 60 counties or whatever it is, that would mean a lot to me. It would help us out. So I know it's a very broad statement, but nonetheless, it's on the record here, so I wanted to pass that along, and whatever we can do to speak to that. But anyway, that's all I wanted to throw in there, so thank you.
Certainly, the motion does at least help those appraisers acting in those 60 county areas by having them not have to focus on those specific license renewal actions at the moment, but gives them the opportunity to get their equipment back together, if you will as their lives. And I'm sure maybe as we get into the rest of the agenda, we can make some public statement, or I guess now is as good a time as any. Kristen, the other things that, is there other things that the agency can do? I suppose there's a recognition that there is a need for appraisers in the Houston or the areas affected by Hurricane Harvey, because besides typical daily appraisal needs, there are also disaster valuation needs, so it compounds the problem. So I think we're certainly aware of that, and this is our public call out. If you need work, and you're qualified in Texas, go to Houston.
Certainly, Madam Chair and board members, and as the board is well aware, there are certain licensing requirements for appraisers, and those are imposed under federal law. And as a board, as much as we would like to, we don't have the capacity to change those in the short term. The AQB is looking at reviewing those and reducing some of the requirements. In their latest exposure draft, they have continued their push to reduce the experience requirements to become a licensed appraiser. But in the meantime, other options available to us is to encourage appraisers, even perhaps from other states, who may wish to take an assignment, a specific assignment, under a temporary permit. That is one option available if they are competent to do so. And the practice for granting those temporary permits is fairly swift. It is a 5-day process. That is the maximum time if they're already licensed in another state. Understandably, though, there are some restrictions with that. It applies to specific assignments that they would be taking. The other option available is license by reciprocity for appraisers who may not be overwhelmed and are competent to appraise properties in Texas, or can get up to speed faster than a brand-new appraiser trainee, there is always the option to become licensed through reciprocity. And so those are the avenues that we would encourage appraisers to take to assist in the recovery from this disaster.
Very good. So we do have a motion and a second. Any additional comment?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add, do we have an announcement on the website? Perhaps maybe an announcement on the landing page stating what the governor has requested might be appropriate. Just a suggestion.
Certainly.
Any additional comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item number 22, update regarding the adoption and implementation of the AMC registry fee rule.
Madam Chair and board members, before you in your materials is the final rule that was adopted by the appraisal subcommittee. This rule will become effective on November 24th, 2017. And we do expect the appraisal subcommittee to issue a bulletin regarding implementation of this rule on or before that date. We have been in communication with the appraisal subcommittee via email and in person at the recent Aero conference regarding implementation of this rule, and we are still working out a few details of implementation, but we expect no issues or complications for the board to implement this rule. The primary concern that we have identified lies with our AMC license holders and their ability to identify what constitutes a covered transaction. Because as you may have read in the rule itself, the fee, the $25 fee, is applied to any appraiser on the AMC's panel who performs an appraisal or performs work on a covered transaction. That issue is pertinent to our license holders because AMCs, as the party receiving an assignment from their client, the lender, the bank, the mortgage broker, may not always know whether or not the transaction is a covered transaction when they are sending that assignment out for completion. The commissioner and I have been asked to participate in a working group with REVA, the Real Estate Valuation Advocacy Association, to help identify best practices for AMCs to implement that rule. And we look forward to working with our stakeholders to help them in this process as we make this transition.
Very good. Any questions or comments? We'll move to agenda item number 23, discussion and possible action regarding proposed changes to the appraiser subcommittee policy statements and filing comments on behalf of the TALCB.
Madam Chair and board members, in your materials are the proposed changes that the appraisal subcommittee, our federal oversight agency, has published to amend their policy statements. Most of these amendments implement new policy statements for the AMC rule and those states that choose to adopt an AMC program, as Texas has done. The comments on the proposed amendments are due on or before November 20th, 2017, this coming Monday. Staff has reviewed the policy statements and the proposed changes, and staff does not recommend any comments to be submitted on behalf of the board. If, however, the board or the board members has any comments that you would like us to submit, we are happy to convene the executive committee to consider and finalize those comments for submission on Monday. If you don't have any proposed comments, then no action need be taken on this agenda item.
The only thing I would ask, Kristen, is this is an action item for the board. And so I'd ask, is there anybody in the public that wants to comment as it relates to these proposed changes? Seeing none, now, board members, do any of you have comments relating to the proposed changes? Okay. Hearing none and suspecting that between Friday, right now, and Monday, there won't be any develop, should something come up over the weekend or someone be observing this meeting through other resources or hear of these comments, is the board without action, is the executive committee without action authorized to consider comments that might come up Monday at 8 a.m.? Or do we need to take action allowing for such in case that a possibility exists?
If the board wants to consider and allow for that possibility, then yes, you could submit or
just
pass
grant the
that
authority
motion
to
and
review to the
take
executive committee?
that action.
Okay. Again, it's the board has the right to make the recommendation. Either is fine with me. Can either do nothing, which is one of the options that I've understood Kristen to offer you, or to make the motion to delegate the authority to review anything that might come in between now and then to the executive committee.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I think
Pinion?
I'll make that motion just to allow that the board delegate authority to review and approve comments to be submitted, if any, to the executive committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And so any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Move to agenda item number 24A, discussion and possible action on recommendations of the Enforcement Committee regarding proposed changes to the mentor guidelines.
In this agenda item, the Enforcement Committee considered staff recommendations for changes to the mentor guidelines to ensure that respondents are matched with the appropriate mentor when completing mentorship required under an agreed order of the board. The Enforcement Committee recommends that the board adopt changes to the mentor guidelines as proposed by staff. Specifically, at pages, well, it's 1 of 3 of the guidelines and page 326 in the materials, you will see the changes, and these changes are designed to ensure that we have a mentor who is competent to assist the respondent with the deficiencies identified in the agreed order. We learned in one of the surveys after a mentorship was completed that there was a certified general respondent who was paired with a certified residential mentor, and that was not particularly effective in completing that mentorship. So this is meant to address that situation.
And it appears the recommendation is that we take these up individually, so item 24A will receive a motion separate from 24B and 24C.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
move that the board adopt changes to the mentor guidelines as presented.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Jeffries, a second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. We will move to agenda item 24B, discussion and possible action on recommendations from the Enforcement Committee regarding House Bill 91 recommendations.
Madam Chair and board members, as you can see in your materials at page 331, there's a copy of House Bill 91, which was enacted by the recent legislative session earlier this year. And this particular bill requires state agencies to review their requirements regarding criminal history background checks. And the Enforcement Committee has reviewed the board's rules regarding criminal history background checks for license holders as required under House Bill 91, and the Enforcement Committee recommends no changes to the board's rules.
Madam Chair, I move that the board adopt the Enforcement Committee's recommendation as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will open 24C, related to the automated valuation models and providing valuations without holding an appraiser's license.
The Enforcement Committee considered issues related to automated valuation models and providing valuations without holding an appraiser license, and recommends that the board file complaints with the Texas Real Estate Commission against those automated valuation models who are licensed by the commission but do not comply with TREC Rule 535.17 and provide the required disclosure under that rule. In addition, the committee recommends that the board delegate further review of the broader policy questions regarding issues surrounding automated valuation models to the executive committee for consideration and recommendation to the full board.
First of all, the executive committee welcomes the opportunity to engage in conversation related to this. And yes, I was being just a little bit facetious in saying so. No, this will be certainly something I think that needs some additional discussion, if you want to, but maybe not. So certainly, that's why we're talking about it now. The recommendation is to, you can see it there, and the summary is clear. I'm assuming each of you's received the revised summary, so the packet, okay, I'm sorry. I received a revised summary, then essentially Kristen read into the record what I was handed today, which goes a little further in describing what happened at the Enforcement Committee level and the recommendation to pass along the discussion, if you will, into the Executive Committee level. As it relates to filing complaints, I think that's something that we may want to have some additional conversation about. So it's a very hot topic in the world today about whether a Zillow Zestimate is a effective opinion of value. And so very, very strong feelings, lawsuits underway at a national level, and that's the conversation we're engaging in.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolton.
I'd like to make just a few comments, maybe to give some context to the board. The Zestimate, which is a valuation model that you are able to search any residential property on their website, or presumably any, and they do give a definition of a Zestimate on their website, and let me quote this. It's a Zestimate home valuation is Zillow's estimated market value. It is not an appraisal. It is a starting point to determine a home's value. And I found various other iterations of this disclaimer, but what I did not find is what appears in Rule 535, 17B and C, which is the required disclosure for a broker's price opinion or competitive market analysis. And it reads, this is a broker's price opinion or comparative market analysis and should not be considered an appraisal or opinion of value. That's required language, and it's not set out here, nor there is a proposed rules that we discussed in our Enforcement Committee meeting that changes that a little bit. This language is not complied with either, the proposed language. And so in order to protect an appraisal's in the appraiser's services and the distinction between those and those offered by brokers, of which Zillow is a corporate broker, I think it's important that those rules be enforced, and it'd be my hope that TREC would enforce those rules so that they would comply and input the correct disclaimer language.
Thank you for the additional explanation, and do think, again, the important topic. Mr. Bolton, I want to be sure that I understood the explanation. You, as I heard you, you believe that TREC is taking up some additional amendments
Yes. Ms. Warman provided us with the proposed rule changes. I don't have them in front of me now, but they're apparently adding an additional valuation product into the rules, not only the broker's price opinion, competitive market analysis, and I believe the new valuation is called a sales estimate. And I think that most similarly probably covers what Zillow is doing.
And so is the TREC proposal in a comment status now, or can someone give us some kind of gauge of where it is?
That's what I'm trying to confirm right now, Madam Chair. I believe that TREC actually adopted changes to the required disclosure under 535.17 this past Monday at its meeting. We're looking to confirm that those were in fact adopted as opposed to just proposed.
Okay. Well, that's helpful again in terms of context, because it does seem to be something that we would want to pay attention to, potentially weigh in on if it's not already adopted, and if it is, we'll deal with that. So any other conversation associated with this topic while they're looking?
I'd just like to add briefly that the recommendation concerning the complaint to TREC is limited to the fact that Zillow didn't use the required language in the statute.
The comment with respect to Zillow is that they do not use the language that's required in the rule. It's the TREC rule that requires the disclosure. There's specific language, and my understanding is that they are not using either the current language or the new proposed language that TREC considered on Monday. So in either event, they would not be in compliance. But Zillow is not the only automated valuation model out there. Many real estate brokers include such valuation models on their own independent websites. So that is another issue for the board to consider.
Yes, we were just, thank you for that clarity, because simply use that as by way of example, these automated systems that Zillow just happens to be one that's very familiar to most people.
And so as a committee, we thought it appropriate to bring this to the board with respect to a clear violation of this rule. And so, and limited to the violation of the specific, of failing to include the correct disclaimer in their website. With respect to the broader policy issues, those are, we didn't make any kind of recommendation other than we wanted the executive committee to take it up to see if there's any other issues that we could, look into with respect to the broader policy issue. But specifically, as it relates to the language in the website, that was what we were referring to in the complaint, as far as I remember, as a committee. If we were going to file a complaint with TREC as a board, it would be with respect to this, I think apparent violation of the rule.
And Madam Chair and board members, I can now confirm that these changes were adopted by TREC at their meeting on Monday. So the disclosure language was modified slightly, and that was the proposed changes that were adopted on Monday.
While those are available in a public setting, if you could get someone to go ahead and just send that to this board, the language change that was made, so that we'll be real-time current with what the proposal is.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to point out that this recommendation came with a unanimous vote, and the intent was, obviously, it was well within our understanding that as individuals, we could have filed a complaint with TREC, but I believe the committee's unanimous decision was that it was our recommendation that the board would stand behind this complaint, because it was pretty apparent to us that in this particular instance, which involved Zillow, they were not in any way, shape, or form complying with the rules set out by TREC. And then the broader issue of other automated valuations and other problems associated with them be taken up by the executive committee. By the way, that still involves me, so I didn't get out of it either way.
So again, for clarity's sake, because that it does give me even more clarity, you have a specific identifiable issue specific to a zestimate, if you will, that you want a single complaint filed for, and then the broader policy of whether or not that goes further would be taken up by the executive committee? Is that the request that you're making of the board?
Madam Chair, yes, I think what we did in our discussions is we identified what we believe to be a clear violation. In further discussions, we looked at some other statutes as to whether zestimates is, and I'm not trying to single out Zillow, but in that particular case, there may be some broader implications as to if those value estimates are appropriate under other rules. It was our understanding that earlier boards may have addressed this before, and before we started throwing out allegations, we wanted to have the leadership of this board to take a look at it, identify, and help to identify any areas where they felt we maybe should investigate this further.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Jeffries?
I'm a little bit confused. In terms of the recommendation of the Enforcement Committee to file a complaint, Kristen, did you say that they have, in fact, adopted a rule change which would make that recommendation by us to be of no effect?
No. What I said was that TREC adopted a rule change, but the disclosure on the Zillow website doesn't comply with either the current rule or the new rule. So the complaint would be valid regardless of whether it was filed under the old rule or the new rule. The old rule required any person who provided a broker price opinion or a comparative market analysis under the Real Estate Licensing Act, or TRELA, to include the following disclosure or disclaimer language in that opinion. The language is, "This is a broker price opinion or comparative market analysis and should not be considered an appraisal or opinion of value. In making any decision that relies upon my work, you should know that I have not followed the guidelines for development of an appraisal or analysis contained in the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice of the Appraisal Foundation." The proposed rule considered by TREC and adopted on Monday shortened the language of that required disclosure and tried to make it more clear for the average consumer. The disclosure now required under the new rule would state, "This represents an estimated sale price for this property. It is not the same as the opinion of value in an appraisal developed by a licensed appraiser under the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice."
Well, I'm a little confused too, but this has passed through committee.
That's correct.
Yes, okay, good enough for me.
Do you happen to have the language from the website?
Yes.
Perhaps we can read that into the record as well.
So the zestimate definition is a zestimate home valuation is Zillow's estimated market value. It is not an appraisal. Use it as a starting point to determine a home's value.
So it was our opinion, clearly, that they didn't include the language that their rule requires them to include. They used the term market value, and they never used the term price, and in the end, they say it's an estimate of the value. And so we read the TREC rule, and they didn't put that disclosure in there at all, and they kept using terms that we felt were more appraisal related, clearly. And in this case, It was our recommendation that a complaint be filed for that instance, and then the broader picture be picked up by the executive committee if there are other automated valuation issues that should be dealt with by this board.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that it sounds like you have fully vetted it. You guys dug into it, and I appreciate it, and I agree with you. It sounds like there is no even attempt to separate or distinguish the word value, which is important to the appraisal industry. And so I'm certainly fine with the recommendation and don't mind making the motion, but I want everyone to first understand where we're headed. And so I don't want to stop any conversation that would be necessary for everybody to understand what's going on. And then secondly, if we are all comfortable, then certainly the floor is open for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I move that the board adopt the Enforcement Committee's recommendations as presented.
I second.
A motion by Mr. Jeffries and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Again, thanks for the hard work, guys. We'll take it up. We'll move to agenda item number 25, discussion regarding the amendment to the 2018 TALCB budget.
Hello again. Priscilla P. Fost, Director of Staff and Support Services. So, as Mr. Black reported, the amendment before you is to amend the budget, which you approved at the August board meeting, with one minor change. The budgeted expenditures have reduced by $24,100, which is a correction of the allocation between TREC and TALCB under the category of professional services for use of the State Office of Administrative Hearings. So it was based on actual usage rather than historical usage when we looked at the year's usage for the previous year in 2017. The motion will be required to amend the budget.
Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and form the motion since I'm head of the committee. I move that the board adopt the amendment to the fiscal year 2018 TALCB budget as presented by staff.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll move to agenda item number 26, discussion and possible action regarding a nomination to create a slate of candidates for the offices of Vice Chair and Secretary of the Board. I've asked Kristen to give you just a brief history on what one would anticipate from this slate of candidates, the actions that would follow.
Typically, as required under the statute, the board elects its officers in February at its meeting then. And the board, some time ago, adopted a policy that would create a slate of officers at the November board meeting from floor nominations, and that slate would be considered at the February board meeting with the option of additional floor nominations at that time if something has changed between November and February. So this practice was simply adopted to streamline or to facilitate the election of officers of the board. And there are two officers to be elected, the vice chair and the secretary of the board. And together with the chair of the board, who is appointed by the governor, those three officers then comprise the board's executive committee.
So the floor is open for nominations.
Madam Chair, I would nominate for the position of Vice Chair, Mrs. Lynch, please.
Okay. The floor is still open, so there can be more than one nomination, and certainly the slate of candidates is there, so we need both positions filled.
Mr. Bolton, who was your nomination?
Martha.
Okay.
She goes by a couple of names. It depends on, and I saw Mr. Lynch join the audience, and I was a little nervous that maybe he had been observing us from a remote location and discovered that I had accidentally misnamed his wife. So, Mr. Lynch, it was purely a mistake on my part. My apologies. Are there other nominations for the positions? We have certainly Secretary of the Board, or maybe we should give you history, because, again, we get up here and work so diligently. Mr. Jeffries is currently serving as your Vice Chair. Mr. Renfro is currently serving as your Secretary. We're going to, again, we need the slate today. As we get to the February meeting, that slate can then be expanded or changed again, because you won't be making the actions to actually elect those people until the February meeting.
Madam Chair, I think that it might be a good thing to put out what the responsibilities and duties are for each of these positions.
Certainly. I will make a quick stab at it, and Kristen will fill in the blanks, because I'm sure I'll miss some things. Your Vice Chair currently has a position of course, acting in the absence of the Chair. They serve on the Executive Committee by, and I always get these wrong, so rule, statute, or some authority. That position also is responsible for chairing your AMC committee. They don't get a choice in that committee assignment. That is a requirement of the Vice Chair. Short of that, what else have I, and all other duties as assigned, Ms. Lynch. What short of that, Kristen, what else?
I believe you have captured all of the duties of the Vice Chair, and just to confirm, that is a statutory requirement that they serve as the chair of the AMC Advisory Committee.
So your Secretary generally serves on your Executive Committee. And its primary extra responsibility, if you will, is to review the proposed minutes as they are then forwarded for full board approval. The Secretary does have an added responsibility of looking more deeply, or they used to. Is that still the case?
The process is that once the video has been prepared and delivered back to staff, the minutes are written, and then the Secretary approves those minutes before they are posted on the board website, and then at the next board meeting, the full board would ratify those minutes.
Kind of what I said, but she was very much more clear in doing so. It's kind of what I meant, maybe I should say. She was much more clear in the explanation. Any additional duties, Mr. Renfro, that we've given you, other than the all other duties as assigned that you have carried as a result of your
No, that
secretary?
pretty well covers it. I mean, the minutes are put together in the video. It's really not that overwhelming of a task. The biggest part of serving as a officer is probably when the executive committee is called into a meeting to discuss some of these topics, which we have a few ahead of us, or ahead of someone.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jeffries.
I'd like to recommend that we have Mr. Buster Renfro serve as Secretary of the Board for the next coming year.
So there's a nomination for Vice Chair at the moment, and a nomination for Secretary of the Board. And certainly, we're not going to hold the nominations open for all day long. So if you are today finished, you can, again, have that same opportunity in February. If you are ready to do so, we can stop nominations for the moment and continue down the agenda.
I move that we cease nominations.
We have a motion to cease nominations. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So you have the current slate of candidates for future publication and consideration. Agenda item number 27, discussion and possible action regarding acceptable forms of payment made to the agency.
So this one is just an update to the board, letting you know that as we're continuing to look for ways to automate and streamline processes within the agency, And also to reduce the risk to the agency by accepting checks, we're making modifications to allow receipt of ACH payments, which is like an electronic check, so that in addition to credit cards and debit cards, we'll have this third form of payment via our website. And we hope that that will reduce some of the traffic that we have, but that is our goal in terms of reducing the number of checks received. And there is no action required on this.
Thank you for that report. We'll move to agenda item number 28, discussion regarding TREC 2017 Internal Audit Report and the 2018 Internal Audit Plan.
So you'll have in your materials a copy of the final internal audit report from McConnell & Jones that was filed with the State Auditor's Office this week. The 2018 audit plan is based on the fiscal year 2017 risk assessment, which you were presented at the August board meeting. The current initiative that we have is ongoing with McConnell Jones, is continuing to look at compliance issues, follow up on previous findings, and then we're also in the process of doing a human resource audit. We hope to have that completed, that they will have that completed before the Texas Workforce Commission shows up for their audit, which is a compliance audit, and that will be conducted in December 12th. And there's no action on this motion. It's simply an update.
Thank you. Are there any questions on either of those? Then we will move to agenda item number 29. Discussion and possible action to approve changes to TALCB forms AMC 3, application for registration as an appraisal management company, AMC R3, renewal and registration as an appraisal management company, COP1, appraisal management company, change of ownership or primary contact person, AMC OPB2, appraisal management company, owner primary contact background history, and IDO TALCB form request for issuance of a new license due to identity theft.
Hi, Gwen Jackson, Director of ELS Division. All of these forms have been updated to implement statutory changes to Chapter 1104 adopted by the legislature, as well as to align the forms with the amendments adopted to 22 TAC Chapter 159. Staff recommends that the board approve changes to the forms.
Thank you.
Madam
Madam
Chair.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you. We move that the board approve the changes to the TALCB forms as presented with an effective date consistent with the rule changes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will move to other business, agenda item number 30, request for potential future meeting agenda items. I have a few notes. Does the board have anything specific that we want to be sure we don't miss? If not, I'll look through my notes to try and get those items identified. So the things I note, Kristen, are an update from our ACE Working Committee. We appointed an ACE Working Committee at our last board meeting, so it will be, more than 90 days and less than 6 months since they would have been acting. And so it would be helpful potentially to have an update there. An update on our Facilities Committee, same thing. It's been a while since we've just addressed that issue. An update on education on the 2-hour course, which you made mention of today, that we are working towards that end goal, and the enforcement recommendation on 153.21, and an update on the April Summit, because in our February meeting, we'll be about 90 days out from our April Summit in terms of just understanding what that structure looks like and how the board might participate. And then, of course, I made the request that as we go into the capacity of doing our tour, that would be helpful if I'm encouraging you, if the tour is in your area and you have the ability to attend, please do so. We do a pretty good job of getting around the state at a staff level, but I think it's important for us to hear at the face-to-face level that we can, any comments that the public has. Most of those, just so you'll be aware, deal predominantly with TREC or Texas Real Estate Commission issues and a little less with TALCB, just because the sheer volume of numbers of licensed realtors versus licensed appraisers is smaller. Is there anything that I've missed, or Kristen, anything that's not clear about those notes? Because I've made them through the course of the meeting today.
I think that covers the gamut, and I'm sure we'll have more for you to consider in February anyway.
Absolutely, I'm sure we will. It sounds like we've got some committee work going on, so I'm sure there'll be other items. Staff always does a great job of keeping us on track and on task so that we can continue to do good work and give the appearance of efficiency that's really almost wholly their responsibility, or they should get the credit for. Agenda item number 31 is discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. You have a calendar in your packet, if you will turn to that.
I believe we've already got February. We do. We have February and May down, right? So I know we do, actually.
Well, and there is one possible consideration that the board might want to make a change in February. That meeting is currently set for February 8th, which is a Thursday, and the reason for that was we anticipated that our summit would be held on Friday, February 9th.
Right, that's what I show.
That is not going to be the case. As you heard earlier in the meeting, the summit will actually be held in April. So if the board would prefer to have its meeting as it normally does on Friday, we have this room available for February 9th.
I think that is a great idea.
Mr. Black, would you like to make the motion?
If I need to, I move that we change the February 8th TALCB meeting to Friday, February 9th.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second about the February meeting. Any additional comment, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Look at the May meeting date. Is it
So we have
currently
that set for, I'm showing the 4th, May 4th? Yes, Friday, May 4th.
May the 4th be with you.
Oh, yes. We can anticipate at least some fun as a result of that day.
And to reiterate, I really appreciate that we can do these on Fridays. It certainly works better for me. I know it does for Martha as well, right? Just with the travel,
Okay.
most certainly.
And
So
for those of you that have to come from such long distances, we do appreciate the sacrifice that you make to get here. So May the 4th still good for everyone? Okay. And Kristen, do you need us to look out further into the future, or would those suffice for now?
If you're inclined to do so, the normal board meeting date would be August 17th, which is the third Friday in August.
works great for me.
Anyone have an issue, conflict? Sounds like a date that you can rely on, Kristen, so.
All righty then.
Sorry, I was just trying to get these in my calendar so that I don't miss them. If there is no other action or no other discussion or needed business of this board, we will be moving to agenda item number 32, which is to adjourn. It is now 10 minutes until 1 o'clock, and we will consider ourselves adjourned. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for a meeting more efficient than I anticipated. We had a long agenda. You did a great job getting through it. Thank you. And thank you, staff, as well, for helping us get there.